everyone, it's Naomi Findlay here, your rapid renovation expert. So are you a little worried about the money side of things in renovating? Or just not sure exactly how to work out how much you're supposed to be spending on your renovation? Now, the business side of things, the setup, it's all ready to go by the time you get to this stage. But what about the budget you'll be using to fund your renovation? Is that locked and loaded and ready to go? Before you even start to look at whether you're getting bang for buck with your actual renovation, you need to have a look at how you're actually going to get those dollars in the first place. So there's a bunch of things you need to consider when you're working out how much you can afford to spend on a property. It's a whole pile of different elements that come together. And I'm here today to give you some pointers on what these things are and how you can apply them to your personal budget and your goals. So let me ask you a question. How much money do you have to play with? Simple question. You don't actually have to tell me, just work it out. Why? Because if you're going to be self-funding, this is the basis of what your renovation project will be riding on. You can't exactly go nuts with an extension or an open plan space or a pool when you don't have enough funds for a paint job and a kitchen makeover. So how do you work out your available funding? Think of everything you own. Think of your savings, your house, your car, maybe businesses, shares, rental income you have. That's the sort of stuff that financial services will be looking at when it comes to working out your serviceability of a loan. But make sure that you also consider, because they will be, things that can take away from your wealth pool, such as car financing or credit cards. Now, I don't have a financial services license and I'm not giving you financial advice here. You need to seek financial advice from a financial services provider in regard to how to fund and how to finance your projects. Let's now move on to how exactly do you get this available funding that they have told you that you have. So there's a pile of different ways that you can access this funding. It could be in the form of, it could be in the form of lines of credit, of loans, of extensions. There's a pile of different ways that you can do it because there's not many people that walk around with like wads of cash. So when the hammer goes down at the auction, you flip the briefcase up and it all comes out. More often than not, most of these sorts of fundings I've just mentioned come from banks, or they might come through a private lender or through some very innovative lending solutions that are coming onto the market right now. So the important part here is that you do seek expert advice, and they'll be working with you on your assets and your liabilities to work out exactly how much money you can borrow. But realistically, how much do you need? How are you going to work out how much you need? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about right now. Before you can work out how much all that upgrading, upscaling, cleaning, fixing, flipping will cost, you need to have worked out what it is you're actually going to do to the property, right? So when you've worked out what all that bedazzling that you'll be doing, you can then work out how much each item on your budget is going to cost. Remember, this means taking into account not just the cost of the actual cabinets or the paint or the tiles, but also the cost of the labour involved. The plumbers, the carpenters, they all need to get paid too, right? So as I've mentioned before, DIY is not always a smart option, but it can be a great way to save you money if you're confident and capable. But remember, all of this needs to be written down. All of these costs need to be written down room by room. Cool. All right, so having all that down on paper in front of you, this is going to help you gauge what your biggest expenses in your renovation costs will be. And so they're not going to be too many tricky surprises down the track. But more importantly, it will also show you where your budget and your biggest part of your budget is going. So you can always reassess whether you really need that element of the renovation at all. The next question is, how much will your perfect property or your perfect renovator cost? Well, that depends a lot on what you can afford. So there's no use having finances to buy a $1.1 million property or a $500,000 property if you're actually shopping around in an area where they're $3 million. And conversely, just because you might be pre-approved for a certain dollar value, it doesn't mean that you have to use it all. If you can jag a property at a lower price point to what you've already been pre-approved for or what you've already been guided for in regard to the price point you can strive for, keep that in your pocket. Now, don't forget that even though you have these pre-approvals, you also need to start to think about exactly what other expenses you're going to need to be catering for. So for example, how much are the setup costs? There are setup costs in every property purchase, and these are just necessary elements to snatching up your ideal project. So you might be using a solicitor or a conveyancer. They need to get paid. There's also expenses like conveyancing, there's title searches, settlement fees, and there's also stamp duty, which certainly needs to be included. So unless you have money already saved up for these expenses, make sure you factor them in regard to the amount of money you're going to need to be borrowing or accessing to make this renovation project come to life. So you've snatched the perfect property now, and there's one more question that I want you to start thinking about and taking into account. How much are all those holding costs going to be? Right, so what do I mean by holding costs? People ask me this all the time. These are the things that you're going to have to pay when your name is on paperwork. Stuff like council fees, strata fees, water rates, and of course interest repayments on the mortgage, as well as electricity or gas bills. It can be easy to forget to include these in your budget, but they absolutely are a valid expense and need to be included at all times. And this is also why many people who are renovating try and do it as fast as possible to minimize their holding costs and maximize their budgets. So those are all of the costs that we've just been talking about that you need to factor in when you're looking at defining your renovation budget or how much money you actually need. So if you spend the time to work out all of these costs before you start, you won't have to worry about it when it comes to the renovation. That way you can actually focus on the exciting part, which is the actual renovating. Thanks for joining me. Did you know I wrote a book all about renovating to create wealth and freedom in your life? I've added the link below in the description for you. Enjoy.